What's poppin', everybody? Episode 30 of the Slippin' Weight Podcast. Happy New Year. I'm going to be doing my end of the year wrap up, fighter of the year, trainer of the year, fight of the year, all the years. And I'm going to be doing a little prediction on Ryan Garcia and Luke Campbell, as well as my wish list for 21. What fights I want to see. Let's get right into it. Man, 2020 was a one of a kind, that's for sure. I started this podcast in 2021, and it's been one of the more normal, reliable things that I've done this year, where I just kind of know it's coming every week. Even with the gap in March where there wasn't any fights, I didn't know when I was going to be able to do the podcast again, but I always had the intention of doing the podcast again, and I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I've come back to it. I'm glad that boxing's been able to come back successfully. And I've really enjoyed doing this every week. And I look forward to expanding, what this channel is next year and doing more of the tutorials. I did my first tutorial last week. If you guys haven't seen that, that's up on my channel now. My YouTube channel for those listening on the audio. Yeah, and I've really enjoyed this, man. This started off as a way to kind of cope with an injury. I'd had surgery on my wrist and wasn't going to the gym, wasn't really doing much of anything physically in my boxing life. And so I started doing this just kind of a way to cope with that time and flex some of that boxing nerve without losing my fucking mind. And this not going to the gym thing has lasted a lot longer than I thought it was going to. Literally, my last day of hand therapy was March 13th. Was the last day I did hand therapy. This fucking mic stand is fucking ass. And that's my main resolution for this podcast in 2021 is to get a new fucking microphone stand. I don't know what I've been doing. I've had this thing since 2008. I've been tightening knobs and unscrewing shit forever, and it's still trash. Look at this thing. If I touch it, it fucking wobbles around. And I do a podcast every week, and I write music. I'm recording shit constantly, so that's my main resolution for 2020 or 2021 is to get rid of this fucking piece of shit once and for all. But anyway, I don't even remember what the fuck I was saying because this thing pissed me off so much, but let's get right into it. Fuck it. I did a little breakdown on everything as far as, what kind of year-end awards I wanted to give out, but I figured prospect of the year, fighter of the year, fight of the year, knockout of the year, and trainer of the year would be, a pretty good place to start. And to start off with, I want to talk about my prospect of the year, and I got to give that to Edgar Berlanga, man. My man Edgar Berlanga from Brooklyn, New York, baby. Stand up. Got to give it to my man, dude. This guy's getting first-round knockouts every time he gets in the ring. How am I not going to give it to him? Of course, he's going to have to step up in competition over time, and he's going to have to prove that against some more capable fighters. But right now, just on the eye test, just on just using my eyes, I think the kid looks like the goods, right? He's putting everybody out in the first round. There's extremely skilled guys that don't put bums out in the first round, But this guy, and he's taking these incremental steps up in competition, and it doesn't really seem to matter. So I look forward to seeing, and there was other guys that I thought maybe could be the prospect of the year. I thought maybe Elvis Rodriguez would be a good pick. I really like Robesi Ramirez. I love how well-rounded his skills are. And as good as both of those guys have been, none of them have 16 fights that are all first-round knockouts. That's a very exciting, even concept, You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, nobody can last more than 3 minutes with this man. That's a very marketable feature right there. To be able to say that. Like, nope, you don't even get out of the first round when you get in the ring with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think it's going to take some levels up before he can find that. I think he's that good because you can see that he's got skills. You know, you can't put guys out like that if you don't know how to set it up. You can't. You know, he clearly knows how to set his punches up and put a little space between him and his man to create power. He obviously has a good understanding of that. He's not smothering himself, you know. So I think this is a very dangerous cat. And, you know, I'd like to see him in with somebody with some more experience, who's had some success, you know, at a different level, at a higher level. You know, Gabe Rosado is one of the first that comes to mind. David Lemieux, I think, would be a great opponent for him. Anthony Durrell would be a great opponent for him. You know, somebody in that's like a true contender, but just guys in the top 10, top 20 that are just below the elite of the division. You know, I want to see what he looks like at that level, because there are times where you step up like that and it's a different thing. It's just a different thing when you're fighting, you know, professional fighters, and then all of a sudden you're fighting world-class professional fighters. You're fighting the guys that are amongst the best 20 guys in your weight neighborhood on the planet. You know, it's a different thing. It's just a different thing. You know, the first thing that came to my mind was, and it's not the same thing at all, but you think about like Broner and Ponce de Leon. You know, Broner looked crazy against everybody before that fight, and then he fought Ponce de Leon. It's like, oh, this is a different thing. Like, do your skills hold up against this skill level, against this class of fighter? I think Edgar Berlanga is way better than Adrian Broner will ever be, but I do think that we got to see it for ourselves against a real good fighter, and I hope we get to see that in 21. You know, my trainer of the year, I felt like this one was actually probably the easiest. It's got to be Derek James. You know, and I'm seeing a lot of other people agreeing with me. You know, having potentially the two best wins of the year. You know, Jermell Charlo stopping Jason Rosario with a jab to the body, and then having Errol Spence fucking beat Danny Garcia after coming back from that car accident. You know, for me, Derek James has got to be the trainer of the year. And anytime you see this dude interviewed, man, like, that's the kind of guy you want in your camp. You know what I'm saying? You want a calm but critical thinking person, you know? And that's exactly how he strikes me. He strikes me as very level and somebody who you can come back to the corner and have like a good exchange with, that's going to, you know, keep you confident but motivate you at the same time, you know? And I think both of those wins are definitely the best wins of 2020 outside of Lopez and Lomachenko. And certainly getting Errol Spence ready to fight, you know, a top 10 welterweight after that car accident, I think is pretty fucking impressive. And I think it absolutely makes him the trainer of the year for me. You know, and then I started thinking about the knockout of the year, and there were some really good candidates for that, right? There was Gervonta Davis against Leo Santa Cruz. That was one of those one shot. You got fucking Dillian White getting knocked the fuck out by Alexander Povetkin. You know, that was a real fucking lights out shot. You had Jermell Charlo putting Rosario out with a jab to the body that left him kind of like hiccuping on the floor. You know, and that was a brutal way to go out. But for me, my knockout of the year and my fight of the year has to be Jose Zepeda and Ivan Baranchyk. You know, these two guys put their fucking heart and soul on the line in this fight. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's 5 rounds and they knock each other down 4 times each. And in the 5th round, Zepeda lands, I believe, a right hand. I got to go back and watch it, actually, because Zepeda's a southpaw. It might have been a left hand. But if you watch this fight, man, literally just before it, Baranchyk puts Zepeda down for the 4th time in the fight. Zepeda gets up. He's, you know, it was more of like a ropes held you up knockdown. He's up. He's doing the count. You know, and Baranchyk, of course, is like, I'm going to fucking stop this guy finally. And Zepeda just puts him out like that. And the truth is, the knockout was so rough that it was disturbing. when it happened, even Tim Bradley, who was doing commentary, was, I think, really just really struck by it. And even if you've just like, I think if you've been hit, or if you've been in the ring, you've kind of felt that fear at all, like, for especially somebody like Tim Bradley who fought at the highest level, it must be really jarring to see something like that, because that could have been him against Ruslan, or it could have been Ruslan. You know, when two guys are swinging like that, landing hard shots like that, there's always the potential that something bad can happen, you know, and that's part of the sport. But I think it's part of the beauty of the sport, in a sense, because these guys are so resilient, and they're putting so much on the line every time they get in the ring, and they know what they're putting on the line every time they get in the ring. And that's the thing too. They know what they're getting into more than we will ever fucking know. They know what they're getting into, you know? And this is one of them fights where you realize maybe you don't leave with everything you had going in. And I hope, you know, for both of them, you know, for Zepeda was taking huge shots in this fight. And he could, you know, if something happened to him after the fight, I wouldn't have been surprised either. You know, sometimes it isn't the one punch that puts you, you know, into a brain bleed. It's a sustained punishment over time, and they both took a sustained punishment over time in this fight. It was 5 rounds, you know, of them just swapping knockout punches that would knock out essentially anybody else that wasn't at the elite level. You know, that's what they were landing on each other. And so for me, it's my knockout of the year and my fight of the year, because it's very rare that quickly do you see 8 knockdowns between the two fighters, and then ending it with a knockout that's that sudden. All those other ones I talked about, yeah, the knockouts were sudden, but the fights were not the same level of fights leading up to the moment. You know, Tank and Leo was a great fight, but they didn't put each other down 4 times. These guys put each other down 4 fucking times each, and then boom, it was over in an instant. And I want to leave it at, you know, when you see knockouts like this, it can be jarring, and you should really internalize that feeling and understand that you should respect these guys. Anybody that puts on a pair of gloves and gets in the ring should have respect for them, because this is what they're risking. You know, as far as my fighter of the year, again, another one I put a lot of time into thinking about. I'm like retarded today. Spent a lot of time thinking about, and I gotta go with Errol Spence. Jr., man. You know, I think you could easily say Tyson Fury for stopping Deontay Wilder. I think you could easily say Tank for knocking out Leo Santa Cruz with 1 shot. I think you could definitely make an argument for Teofimo Lopez, you know, winning a decision over Vasily Lomachenko. But for me, the magnitude of, you know, the comeback that Errol went through, and the severity of that car accident, and just the fact that he's alive, let alone able to prepare himself for a high-level boxing match, I really think it's amazing. It's a lot like the Danny Jacobs story, you know, where it's very rare that people survive these kinds of, or not rare, but it's sometimes people don't survive these kinds of things. So when somebody survives and then is able to perform at that level again, it's just like, it really is amazing. And I feel like on a personal level, I've had a lot of injuries, right? I've had issues with my hands. I've had issues with my ankles. I've had shoulder surgery. I've had knee surgery, right? So all of these things, it's never easy to come back from these things. It gets harder, because every time it's just like, it's one more thing that's damaged on you. So every time you got to come back, you're dealing with stuff that's fixed already. You know what I'm saying? So for him, in that kind of accident, you know, to not really have that many crazy injuries that aren't like cosmetic injuries, you know, teeth and facial injuries and whatever, like, it's just amazing, man. It's just amazing. I'm glad he's healthy. I'm glad he can still fight. And clearly, he's still maybe the best fucking welterweight in the world. Which leads me to my wish list for 21. And I'm going to lead off with, I got to see Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence get it on. I put a caveat on this, right? If either of them are fighting Manny Pacquiao, I'm good with that. But I gotta see those three guys fighting each other in 21. Preferably, I want to see them too. But if I can get the three of them fighting in 21, I'll take it. You know, in a sense, beggars can't be choosers with that because none of them are fighting each other. So I think if we can get Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Crawford, and Errol Spence fighting each other, we'll have a sense of who the best welterweight in the world is. And we'll have a better sense, I think, of who the top pound-for-pound fighters are. You know, a lot of times big fights like that separate the pound-for-pound list a bit, where, you know, maybe right now you have Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford kind of similarly ranked in your pound-for-pound list. They fight each other. I think if they fight each other and it's not that close, right, you're not going to have them so even in the pound-for-pound list. It's fights like these where we find out who the best is. Right now, at welterweight, the best is just a theory. It's just a theory right now. Until they actually get in the ring and do it, it's all theoretical. You know what I'm saying? So that's my first wish list for 2020. And then as far as undisputed champions, I got to see Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. I got to see that fight in 21. You know, there's nothing in the way outside of maybe Joshua having to fight Usyk as a mandatory. But even if he's got to do that, fucking get that fight on. I know it's high risk, but if he's able to beat Usyk, then it's very clear that they're the two best in the world. And then they got to fight each other. There's no other fight that matters at that point. It's like we're all just, again, it's one of those, the best is theoretical. You're just building your resume against the other champion, which is, I fucking hate that strategy in boxing right now where it's like, oh, I don't have to fight this guy to be the best. I just have to have a better resume than that guy to be the best. Which that's not how it should be. So I think they both want to fight each other. I think it's a fight that can get made and will get made. It's just a matter of, is it the very next fight? You know, and sticking with the fucking unification thing, man, I want to see Jose Ramirez and Josh Taylor. I want to see those two guys fight each other, because when you look at Josh Taylor's last couple of fights, you know, I think you'd have to make him a little bit the favorite just with the level of his boxing skill and, you know, having that kind of fight with Regis Prograis, who I think is a great fighter. You know, that's a fight I think that is really important in the sport of boxing, and I think the winner maybe even has like that golden ticket to move up for a high-level welterweight fight, and maybe those fights are a little easier to make. I think Crawford and Ramirez, Crawford and Josh Taylor, those are easier fights to make than Crawford and Errol Spence. So, you know, if I think those two guys fought and we knew who the best junior welterweight in the world was, and then that guy moved up to welterweight and got in that mix, who doesn't want to see that? I mean, both of those guys are extremely entertaining, extremely skilled at what they do. You know, Josh Taylor more of a standard boxer, Ramirez more of a come-forward boxer-puncher. But I think it's a great matchup. I think it's, you know, the more undisputed champions there are in boxing, the better it is for the sport. It may not be better for the belts and the sanctioning bodies and their sanctioning fees, but, like, I think the more champions, or I should say the less champions there are in boxing, the better it is for the sport. There's less confusion with the public. It's like easier to market the fights. It's like, oh, that's the heavyweight champ. We can't say that shit anymore. We can't say, oh, that's the champ. That's not the champ. There's 4 fucking champs. There's 3 champs. There's 2 champs, and they won't fight each other. Whatever the fuck it is, you know what I'm saying? Let's have one champ in as many weight classes as possible. Why not? You know what I'm saying? That's the whole point of the sport. We're trying to get to who the number 1 fighter is in each weight class. Ultimately, that's the goal of a sport. The business gets in the way of that a lot, right? But the idea of the sport is to have the best fight the best to find out who the fucking best is. It's very simple stuff, you know what I mean? So that would definitely be my third fight. I think another great unification fight to put together is Gennady Golovkin and Demetrius Andrade. You know, both of those guys are on DAZN with Matchroom, with Eddie Hearn. You know, I'm sure that Golovkin for the last 2-3 years has been kind of holding out for another Canelo fight. I don't see that coming right now. It looks like Canelo's doing other things at 168. It looks like he wants to be a super middleweight full time. So if he's going to be a full time super middleweight, Golovkin's got to fight these guys. And I think it would pretty much be hard to argue that Golovkin's is not the best, right? I mean, Golovkin's the best middleweight in the world if Canelo's not there. And I think that Andrade is a really skillful dude that's really high risk, low reward, but he deserves the fight. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's had a belt for a long time. He's done what you're supposed to do. Fucking Logan Paul and Jake Paul are fighting on pay-per-view cards. Like, and Demetrius Andrade can't get a unification fight? That's fucking crazy to me. You know what I mean? So I would love to see Golovkin and Andrade in 2020. I think that's... And I also say that because it should be easy to make. Right? Same weight class, same promoter. Both have belts. Seems like pretty easy work to me. I don't know. That's just me. So that's also on my fantasy wish list for 21. My last one, I got to go with Teofimo Lopez and Gervonta Davis. You know, they both had tremendous wins this year. They're both fucking great young fighters. Lopez, you know, with the very close decision over Lomachenko, even though the cards were wide. You know, I didn't think he was going to win that fight. And he did a lot of shit that I didn't think he could do. And he showed a versatility and an ability to switch up. And he clearly had Loma's respect. And on top of that, we found out that, you know, Loma was injured, but Teo was injured too. He had a fucked up foot and he had surgery after the fight. And so you got to have respect for that, man. And then the way that Tank was able to put Leo to sleep. You know, Leo Santa Cruz is a great fighter. And I know that Tank is fighting at 130 right now, but he said, I'll fight at 135 for the right fight. So, to me, two big punches like that, two guys, I think, in their early, mid-20s that are working on being in their prime pretty soon. Like, I think that that's one of the best fights you can make at 135 right now. And as a bonus fight, for what I would want to see, I'm going to throw in Shakur Stevenson and Vasily Lomachenko at 130 pounds. I've heard Stevenson talk about it. I read an article that fight may be a possibility at some point because ultimately, man, Lomachenko is a small lightweight. He's been smaller than every fucking lightweight he's fought. He's naturally a 130-pound fighter. I think he will move back down, and I think it's going to be very tricky for anybody at that weight to hang with him, except maybe for Shakur Stevenson. So hopefully we can see that, and depending on also how the Oscar Valdez and Miguel Berchelt fight turns out, maybe we can also get a sense of who the best 130-pound fighter in the world is next year as well. You know, it's my wish list. We can only fucking hope, right? Last thing I want to talk about in this year wrap-up is the first fight of 2020. Saturday, January 2nd, we got Ryan Garcia and Luke Campbell. I love this matchup, man. I love this matchup. This is the kind of fight I want Edgar Berlanga to have. I want him to, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a real step-up, test-yourself fight. Because Luke Campbell gave Jorge Linares a great fight and gave Lomachenko a great fight. It's tough because he's defined by his losses in a sense, but the losses are to the absolute elite in the world. And, you know, Ryan's never fought at that level. It doesn't mean that he can't and that he's not ready, but he's never done it. And so, you know, there are some unknowns. There are some questions. How do you respond to people that can adjust, people that have an answer to what you're doing? You know, I've watched Luke Campbell's last couple of fights, including the Lomachenko fight, and his skills were great, man. I mean, he boxes beautiful. He's got a nice long jab. He has good defensive instincts. Moves his head really well. His footwork is great. He moves around the ring really well. You know, and Ryan, he's got great hand speed. He's got that one punch put you out power. He's got a lot of charisma in the ring. He holds himself confidently, and he'll walk you down, you know, with that shoulder up, and he'll kind of move his head and whatever. And I think that this whole theory of him being like just an Instagram star is fucking ridiculous. Like, he's a fighter who's also famous on Instagram because he's a good-looking kid. You know what I mean? Like, the kid's a killer. And he'll put you out with one fucking punch. Best believe it. I think he's one of the baddest dudes at 135. And I think this is a good fight for him to prove it, because everybody knows what Luke Campbell brings. Luke Campbell brings high skill level, world-class, Olympic gold medal boxing. So, and nobody that Ryan's fought has any of those kinds of accomplishments. As a whole, I got to lean towards Garcia. But this is one of those fights where you really don't know. These step-up fights are always a little weird. Ryan Garcia is only 22 years old, so, you know, a loss wouldn't ultimately be the end of the world for him. And I think any way you chop it up, this is going to be a good experience fight for him. It's a good step-up, gauge where you're at skill level-wise fight. See what you need to work on maybe. Or he walks through Luke Campbell like he's walking through these last couple of guys, and we know that we're dealing with a bad motherfucker. You know what I mean? So I look forward to that. Again, that's going to be Saturday on DAZN. So that's episode 30 of the Slip and We podcast, guys. Happy New Year. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with me. I'll be back in the middle of the week to do another technique tutorial, so be on the lookout for that. And yeah, I'll see you next year, guys. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Peace.